My grandson called me a dial-up dinosaur at the dinner table, laughed in my face, right there, in front of his friends. Said I was too old to understand modern tech, that I should stick to crossword puzzles and let the real innovators build the future. He had no idea who he was talking to. So I did what any humiliated, underestimated grandfather with a long memory and a sharper mind would do. I called up a tech genius I mentored years ago, someone I put through college when no one else would. And together, we built something quietly, something powerful, something that made my grandson's flashy little startup look like a toy. 6 months later, I bought his company out from under him, and I fired him. This is the story of how I stopped being a punchline and reminded my family exactly who the hell I am. What happened next was surprisingly unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. My daughter insisted we have the family over that Sunday. She said it had been too long since we all sat around the table, like we used to back when Diane was still alive. Back then, Sundays meant roast chicken, cards afterward, and Mason crawling into my lap asking me to tell him stories about how phones used to have cords. He used to be fascinated by that. Couldn't believe a phone couldn't fit in your pocket. Those days were gone. Now Mason was 24, and apparently too evolved for pants that didn't taper at the ankles or shoes without white soles. He ran some startup I barely understood, something about AI-curated social feeds or virtual event mapping. I nodded politely every time he tried to explain it, but it all felt like fluff. No real utility. No substance. But again, I'm just the old man in the recliner, right? My daughter, Angela, sat at the head of the table. She always insisted it felt weird having me sit there since Diane passed. I didn't fight it. I pick my battles these days. The table was full. Angela's husband, Mike, was beside her, endlessly checking his smartwatch. My younger granddaughter, Ava, was buried in her phone, probably mid-snap or TikTok or whatever filtered reality kids live in now. And then there was Mason, the golden boy, seated directly across from me, flanked by 2 of his startup buddies, both in hoodies more expensive than my suit jacket. It was during dessert, some coconut cake I didn't care for, that the conversation turned. "So, Grandpa," Mason said, dragging out the paw like he was 12 again. "Do you still use that old desktop in your study? The one with the what was it? Windows 98. I chuckled lightly, putting down my fork. "No, Mason. I upgraded years ago. I use Windows 10 now." His friends burst out laughing, one of them nearly choking on his coffee. Mason grinned wide. "Windows 10? Grandpa, that's like ancient now. Nobody uses that. You're still a dial-up dinosaur, huh?" The table laughed. And I laughed too, on the outside. On the inside, I felt my heart turn hard. "A dial-up dinosaur," I repeated, forcing a smile. "You probably still think TikTok is a breath mint," one of his friends added. Mike laughed loud enough to shake the table. Even Angela tried to muffle a chuckle, covering her mouth with her napkin. Ava didn't look up from her phone. I wanted to let it slide. I really did. But something about the way Mason leaned back in his chair, cocky and smug, arms behind his head like he owned the room, it burned. The same boy I used to take to Radio Shack. The same boy I once built a crystal radio with on a rainy Saturday when he was 8. He used to sit wide-eyed beside me as I explained transistors. Now he looked at me like a relic. "Funny," I said quietly. "I remember when you cried because you couldn't figure out how to hook up the HDMI cable to your first PlayStation. Who helped you with that again?" Mason waved it off. "Come on, Grandpa. That was years ago. We all needed help once. But tech moves fast. Not everyone keeps up. It's okay." He didn't mean it to be kind. He meant it as a final pat on the head before turning the conversation back to his buddies. I didn't reply, but I didn't forget, either. That night, after everyone left and the dishwasher hummed in the background, I sat in my study, the same one Mason had mocked, staring at the screen. Windows 10, sure, but I knew what I was doing. I hadn't just used tech. I'd helped build it. Back in the 80s, I designed networking protocols for a defense contractor. My code once ran secure comms between aircraft carriers. I didn't post memes. I helped invent the systems that allowed memes to exist. But no one cared about that now. Except one person might. Douglas Chung. The last time I spoke to Douglas was over a decade ago. He was just a skinny, brilliant kid I mentored at MIT. Could build a neural net from scratch, but couldn't afford ramen without scholarships. I'd sponsored him through 2 years of grad school, no strings attached. He went on to work for some tech giant out west, and I only heard from him once, a short thank you email the year Diane passed. I found his contact in my old Gmail. Still there. Douglas Chung at. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I wrote the message. Subject: an old dinosaur's idea. Douglas. It's Richard Carter, your old sponsor. I have an idea, and I think it's good. Got a minute? I hovered over the send button. Then I clicked it. Less than 20 minutes later, my inbox pinged. Subject: of course I remember you. Richard. I have more than a minute. Call me. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the phone. He picked up on the second ring. Mr. Carter? His voice hadn't changed much, deeper now, but still sharp. Douglas, I said, leaning back in my chair. Hope I'm not interrupting something important. You're the reason I got out of debt before 30. You can interrupt me any day. What's this idea? I took a breath. And then I told him. Bridge. That's what I called it. A simple, elegant app for seniors, designed by seniors. A clean interface, large fonts, voice commands, but with powerful integrations under the hood. It wasn't about catching up with the younger generation. It was about empowering ours to use tech on our terms. No more being left out of group chats because you don't have the right app. No more doctors assuming you don't check your portal. No more grandkids laughing at you because you said to Facebook. Bridge would simplify, translate, and consolidate. A digital Swiss Army knife for older adults. Intuitive, respectful, powerful. Douglas was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Then he said, That's genius. I want to build it, I told him. And I want it to work. I don't want a gimmick. I want something that actually helps. He didn't hesitate. Let's build it. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not from stress, but from excitement. My heart raced the way it used to when Diane and I would plan a road trip. I'd been called a dinosaur. And maybe I was. But even dinosaurs ruled the earth once. And some of us still remembered how to bite. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I didn't need an alarm. Never had. Old habit from my days as an engineer. The quietest hours were always the clearest. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, sat on the back porch, and listened to the silence. But my mind was anything but still. The idea, bridge, kept evolving in my head like a circuit diagram coming into focus. I could practically see the user interface in my mind's eye. Clean. Purposeful. No fluff. By 7 a.m., I had an outline scribbled on 2 legal pads. By 9, I had a Zoom link from Douglas. And by 10:15, we were face to face. Albeit across the country, me in my cozy home office and him in a sleek, sunlit San Francisco apartment that looked like it had been ripped out of a catalog. Mr. Carter, Douglas said with a grin. Still sharp as ever. I chuckled. Just call me Richard. You're not a broke grad student anymore. True, he said, raising his coffee. But I still owe you for that semester's rent you paid behind my back. Consider it paid in full if you help me build this thing. He leaned in. I meant what I said on the phone. This is a brilliant idea. But it's not just about the tech. It's personal, isn't it? I nodded. You ever been laughed at by your own blood? Douglas hesitated, then said quietly, Yeah, more than once. We locked eyes across the screen. There it was, that unspoken understanding. Tech could make you rich, could make you relevant, but it couldn't protect you from being underestimated. Especially by the people who were supposed to see you the most clearly. Then you get it, I said. This isn't just an app. It's a middle finger to being dismissed. Douglas smirked. Let's do it. Over the next few weeks, we built quietly. He handled the front-end team, pulled in a designer he trusted from his old firm, and brought in a security specialist from his college network. I funded it all, kept everything off the books. I didn't want Mason or anyone else in my family knowing I was back in the game. Douglas and I used Slack to communicate. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was mocked for using email, and now I had more Slack channels than Mason probably did. We called the project Bridge internally. The tagline we landed on? Connect on your terms. Every feature we designed came from personal pain points. Richard Mode, that's what the devs started calling the accessibility preset, had extra large text, color contrast optimization, and a built-in voice assistant that didn't sound like a robot. We integrated calendar syncing, medication reminders, one-click Zoom links, and even a Call My Grandkid button that auto-dialed the most recent young family contact. You could even send a voice memo directly through it with one tap. We beta tested it with a group of retirees from my local country club. I watched as folks who struggled with regular apps suddenly started texting their kids, ordering groceries, and tracking appointments without frustration. One man cried when he realized he could finally join his daughter's wedding planning Zooms. And me? I kept my mouth shut at family dinners, smiled politely when Mason went on about scaling Loop Hub and how he just landed a dinner meeting with an angel investor. I played the part of the doddering grandpa while I watched his app, bloated, buggy, and user hostile, slowly hemorrhage users. Douglas called me one night around midnight. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "We just passed 200,000 downloads. Organic. Already. No ads. Just word of mouth. Tech for seniors isn't a niche, Richard. It's a tidal wave." I leaned back in my chair. The same chair Mason mocked me for using. "Good," I said. "Let it wash over them." Around week 7, Douglas told me something interesting. Mason's startup, Loop Hub, it's flailing, he said. They pivoted twice in the last 6 months. Their UI is a mess, and the dev team's bleeding talent. I stayed quiet, letting the news settle like a warm drink in my chest. Douglas went on. "One of my contacts says they're looking for a buyer." Quietly, my fingers tapped the edge of my desk. "Do it," I said. Douglas raised an eyebrow. "You serious?" "I want it." He hesitated. "We'll need a shell corp. If your name's on the offer, it'll spook them." "I'm not just buying his startup," I said. "I'm buying my name back." We set it up through a boutique firm out of Boston, legit, discreet, airtight. We crafted an acquisition offer that was just generous enough to appeal to a flailing founder, but didn't reek of desperation. The bait was simple. Loop Hub would become a feature under the Bridge umbrella. A soft landing. No sudden moves. Mason wouldn't know it was me until I walked into the final meeting. Douglas laughed when I told him my plan. "You're brutal." "No," I said. "I'm fair." The morning of the buyout meeting, I dressed carefully. Navy blazer. Crisp shirt. No tie. I wanted to look sharp, but calm. Like someone who knew exactly what he was doing, because I did. Douglas texted. "He's here. Smug as hell. You ready?" I typed back. "Born ready." I walked into the boardroom and watched Mason's smile die on his face. "Grandpa," I sat down across from him, placed the folder on the table, and said, "We're prepared to move forward with the acquisition, pending final signatures." He looked between me and Douglas, completely blindsided. "Wait, you made the offer?" "That's right. You built Bridge?" "With some help," I said calmly. "While you were laughing at me for using Windows 10, I was building something real." He didn't speak, just stared, mouth half open. I pushed the papers toward him. "You'll find everything in order. Employment contracts have been voided. Effective immediately." "You're firing me?" he said, eyes wide. "No," I said. "You fired yourself. You just didn't realize it." By the time the Bridge beta reached its 3rd release, the numbers were doing all the talking. Organic growth, 4.9 average ratings, press interest without us spending a single dollar on PR. It felt like catching lightning in a bottle. But what made it even sweeter was that nobody in my family knew. Not Mason, not Angela, not even Ava, who was probably the closest thing to tech literate in the bunch. And that secrecy? It wasn't just strategy. It was satisfaction. Every Sunday, I sat across from Mason as he rambled on about seed funding rounds and pivoting to meet demand. I'd nod, sip my coffee, and say things like, "Sounds complicated," while my phone buzzed in my pocket with new Bridge installs. Angela remained proud of her son, and to her credit, she wasn't wrong to be. Mason was charismatic, charming in public, and had just enough buzzwords to convince investors he knew what he was doing. But substance? That was missing. Even I could see it. His app, Loop Hub, was supposed to be some kind of event-driven social net. But in truth, it was a bloated Frankenstein of a platform that couldn't decide if it was for creators, event hosts, or lonely extroverts trying to meet like-minded strangers in coffee shops. It was confusing. Cold. It wasn't built for anyone. It was built to impress. Bridge, on the other hand, was simple. It solved a problem. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. And most importantly, it respected its users. It didn't mock them for needing help. It held out a hand and said, "Here, let me show you." Douglas and I spoke daily by that point. He worked out of a co-op space in Palo Alto, and I stayed tucked in my study in Connecticut, the same one Mason had once laughed at. I started waking up earlier and earlier, checking code reviews and UX reports before breakfast. Douglas added me to our internal GitHub. I didn't do much code myself, but I left comments here and there. Occasionally, a developer would respond with a surprised, "Wait, who's Richard?" "That's actually a great point." Douglas always replied, "That's our ghost in the machine." We rolled out audio tutorials, simplified onboarding, and a help my family understand feature that created personalized how-to guides for popular apps like Venmo or Google Photos. The feedback was overwhelming. Grandparents were FaceTiming their grandkids for the first time. Widowers were joining book clubs over Zoom. One beta tester, a retired librarian, sent us a handwritten letter saying Bridge gave me my independence back. I read that line over 3 times. Because that was it. That was the point. Around month 4, I started getting invitations. Tech bloggers, morning talk shows. One of the AARP content creators wanted an interview. Douglas kept us out of the spotlight for now, saying, "Let's wait until post-acquisition. Then we go loud." And so I stayed in the shadows, watching as my app, the one they said I was too old to understand, climbed charts Mason couldn't even see from his perch. But I could see him falling. Angela mentioned one Sunday that Mason seemed distracted lately. I kept my face neutral, even as I caught the edge in her voice. She blamed the investors, the pressure, the industry. "They expect kids like him to move at warp speed," she said, pouring herself a 3rd glass of wine. "No one his age is ready for that." "Maybe," I said. "Some of them need to slow down before they crash." She frowned. "He looks up to you, you know." I looked at her, long and hard. "No," I said gently. "He used to." Then came the voicemail. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon while I was pruning the rose bushes. I ignored it at first. Probably a robocall or a donation request. But something told me to check it. It was Mason. "Hey, Grandpa. Listen, I know we haven't really talked about work stuff much, but I could really use your advice. Things are getting tight over here. One of our investors backed out, and the dev team's threatening to walk unless we get a new roadmap. I know you've always been, like, the grounded one. I don't know. Just call me if you have time." I played it twice. The first time, I felt a pang of something close to pity. But the second time, I felt nothing but calm. He wanted my advice? After mocking me in front of his friends? After years of brushing off my attempts to connect, to understand, to offer him real mentorship? No, this wasn't the time for lessons. This was the time for consequences. I didn't call him back. I forwarded the voicemail to Douglas instead. His reply was one word. "Brutal." I replied. "Deserved." The acquisition meeting was just around the corner. I had a quiet countdown running in my mind. 7 days. 6. 5. I kept busy, pretending to be retired, while everything real hummed under the surface. We finalized the Shell Corp paperwork. Bridge's holding entity would absorb LoopHub in one clean sweep. Mason's investors were too eager to notice the lack of personal detail behind the offer. They just wanted out. Mason didn't read the contract closely enough to see what was coming. I should have felt guilty, but I didn't, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about correction. On the eve of the meeting, Ava stopped by unexpectedly. "Hey, Grandpa," she said, standing awkwardly in my doorway. "Can I come in?" "Of course," I said. "You want some tea?" She shrugged. "Sure." We sat in the kitchen as the kettle whistled. She fidgeted with her phone before finally blurting, "Is it true you used to build stuff? Like actual tech?" I blinked. "Who told you that?" "I found your old LinkedIn," she said. "You worked on encryption protocols in the 80s? I smiled slowly. "I did." She looked down. "I guess I always thought you were just into plants." "I like plants," I said. "Doesn't mean I forgot everything else." She nodded, still not looking at me. "Mason said you don't understand modern tech. But the stuff you built, it's like the foundation of everything." I felt something crack open in my chest. "You ever want to learn more?" I said softly. "I'd be happy to teach you." She smiled. I'd like that. When she left, I sat alone in the kitchen for a long time. That moment wasn't about the app, or revenge, or legacy. It was about continuity. And I realized that bridge wasn't just something I was building to prove a point. It was something I was building to pass on. The air was different that morning. I could feel it, thick, expectant, like the minutes before a thunderstorm. I'd been rehearsing what I'd say in that boardroom, but the truth was, I didn't need to. Every word, every look, every ounce of restraint had been building for months. Maybe years. It was all there inside me, coiled and ready. Douglas picked me up in a black sedan. He was wearing a tailored navy suit, crisp as a blade, and had that quiet gleam in his eyes that only shows up when you know the house always wins, and you are the house. You good? He asked as we drove into the city. I'm better than good, I said. I'm exactly where I should be. The boardroom was minimalist, glass walls, white oak table, exposed concrete ceiling. It reeked of ambition and desperation. Startups always wanted to look lean and brilliant, like they were one ping-pong table away from becoming Apple. But when you stripped it down, it was just another room full of overcompensating boys playing grown-up. Mason was already there. He stood when he saw us, grinning, bouncing on the balls of his feet like a Labrador who didn't know he was walking into the vet. Douglas, he said, reaching out. Good to finally meet you in person, man. Can I just say, we're so psyched about this merger? Like, it's the perfect fit. LoopHub's social graph plus bridges. And then he saw me. The smile cracked. Grandpa. I stepped in, calm and slow, and took a seat across from him. His eyes flicked to Douglas, then back to me. Wait, what is this? I slid the folder across the table. This is the buyout contract. His hands didn't move. You're behind this. I nodded. This is a joke, right? You're not serious. You. What the hell do you even know about? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. You called me a dial-up dinosaur. In front of your friends. You mocked me for being old, for not understanding tech. But here we are. You're out of money, out of users, and out of ideas. And I just bought your company. His jaw worked, but no words came out. Douglas sat back, arms crossed, saying nothing. I pushed the next page forward. This is the transition clause. All executive positions are vacated effective immediately, including yours. You're firing me? No. I'm rescuing what's left of your mess. But yes, your services will no longer be required. He laughed. Or tried to. This is insane. You don't know how to run LoopHub. We're not running LoopHub, Douglas said for the first time. We're folding it into Bridge. Your app will be a footnote. Mason's face turned crimson. You can't do this. I just did. He stood suddenly, hands on the table. You're ruining everything I built. No, Mason, I said, voice low. You ruined it. You burned cash like it was monopoly money, ignored your own users, and thought branding could cover up bad product design. You didn't build a company. You built a vanity project. You don't understand what it's like, he snapped. Trying to be taken seriously when everyone thinks you're too young, too green. Oh, believe me, I said, standing to meet him eye to eye. I understand exactly what it's like to not be taken seriously. Because you did that to me. You made damn sure I felt obsolete. Silence. Then I leaned in slightly. But here's the thing about dinosaurs, Mason. They may be old, but they leave deep footprints. And some of us still have teeth. After the meeting, he stormed out without another word. Douglas turned to me and shook his head. I wish I could bottle that moment. Play it back every time someone underestimates me. I smiled faintly. They'll underestimate you again. That's the gift. He looked puzzled. Gift? Every time they think you're nothing, I said. You get to prove them wrong. Angela called me 2 days later. What the hell did you do to my son? The venom in her voice was sharp enough to cut steel. I'd expected this. I offered him a lifeline, I said. He drowned in his own ego instead. He's devastated, Dad. He says you humiliated him. No, I said coldly. He did that to himself. I gave him more grace than he gave me. You blindsided him. You didn't even give him a chance. Oh, and when he called me a dinosaur in front of strangers, what chance was that? When he dismissed my entire career with a punchline, what warning did I get? She was silent. Maybe, I said more gently now. If you had corrected him years ago, I wouldn't have had to do it this way. You're just like Mom, she whispered. I felt that one, but I didn't back down. She never tolerated disrespect either. I became the villain in family group texts. Ava told me Angela cried for an hour after our call. Mason blocked me on social media. Even Mike gave me a weird look at the next Sunday dinner, like I was some unpredictable stranger in his house. And yet, I didn't regret a thing. Because the next day, I got an email from a woman named Eleanor, a 72-year-old retired teacher from Omaha. She wrote, I just used Bridge to schedule a Zoom call with my granddaughter in Japan. I cried when I saw her face. Thank you for building something for us. I read it 3 times. Then I leaned back, stared out the window, and whispered to myself, that's why. The Sunday after the buyout was the quietest I could remember. No one canceled dinner, which almost surprised me. I thought perhaps Angela might call it off in protest, or Mason would refuse to show up altogether. But I think part of them needed to see me, to make sense of what I'd done, or maybe just to verify I was still the same man who used to fix their porch lights and shovel their driveways before dawn. The tension settled into the house like a fog. Angela arrived with 2 casseroles and 0 eye contact. Mike gave me a nod, but didn't bother with his usual sports banter. Ava lingered behind, holding a container of brownies, eyes flicking between all of us like she was watching a live family drama unfold. And Mason? He came in last. No smile, no jokes, just a muttered, hey, before he sat down at the far end of the table, as far from me as possible. I carved the roast chicken in silence. No one brought it up directly, not at first, but every conversation was a minefield. Angela brought up Mason's plans to recalibrate, which I assumed was code for unemployment. Mike asked about the weather 3 different times. And Ava, bless her, tried to pull focus with a story about a school project, but her voice cracked halfway through and she stopped trying. It was Mason who broke the dam. Guess you're the tech genius now, huh? I looked up slowly. I never stopped being one. His jaw clenched. You humiliated me. I corrected you, I said, in the only language you seem to respect, results. Angela cut in. Dad, please, not at the table. No, I said, setting down my fork. If we don't talk about it here, we'll keep dancing around it forever. Mason laughed bitterly. You could have just talked to me. You didn't have to buy my company and toss me out like trash. You didn't come to me with respect, I said. You came with arrogance. You wanted advice once you'd already sunk the ship, because I thought you'd actually help. No, I interrupted, sharper now. You thought I'd quietly boost your ego, pat you on the head, and tell you you're smarter than me. You didn't want guidance. You wanted applause. Mason stood up. You don't understand what it's like having to prove yourself every day. I stood too. You think I don't know that? I built encryption for military comms when I was your age. You think anyone gave me a trophy? I had to earn my space in rooms full of men who looked down on me. I know exactly what that feels like. He didn't speak. You didn't fail because I bought your company, Mason. You failed because you thought style mattered more than substance. That's on you. After dinner, the house cleared faster than usual. Angela barely said goodbye. Mike gave me a stiff handshake, eyes down. But Ava lingered. Can I ask you something? She said softly. Anything. Do you ever feel guilty? I nodded slowly. I do. So why did you still do it? I thought about that. Then I said, because some lessons have to cost something. Otherwise, they don't stick. She was quiet a moment, then said, you know, I think you were right. But maybe, next time, just talk before you torch the place. I smiled faintly. There won't be a next time. Later that week, I ran into someone from church, Linda, a sweet woman who always asked about my garden. She stopped me in the grocery store, eyes wide. I heard about what happened with your grandson. Is it true you bought his company? I paused. What did Mason say? She shrugged. He hasn't said much. But his friends are talking. Some are calling you a tech tyrant. Others say you're a legend. I chuckled. I'll take either. She leaned in. I think what you did was brave. I didn't do it to be brave, I said. I did it to be heard. That night, the silence in the house felt heavier than usual. Diane's old photo still sat by the fireplace. I looked at it for a long time. She would have handled this differently. Softer, quieter, but she would have understood. She never suffered fools or cruelty. You'd have slapped Mason upside the head before he ever made that joke, I muttered aloud. And then I laughed. A week later, Ava showed up again. She brought her laptop. I want you to show me how to build something, she said. I raised my eyebrows. What kind of something? I don't know, she said, sliding into the seat next to me. But I want to learn. And I trust you. I didn't say anything right away. Just opened my laptop, opened a blank file, and started typing. I returned to the chess cafe for the first time in months. It sat on the corner of Main and Maple, a quiet place with scratched wooden tables, mismatched chairs, and the smell of old books and stronger coffee. Diane and I used to come here in our early retirement years. I'd play long matches against retirees with names like Pete and Jorge, and she'd read a mystery novel in the corner with a pot of chamomile. She always called it my second office. Today, I came alone. The barista was new, young, tattoos up his arms, and a nose ring. He asked for my name for the order. When I told him, his eyebrows lifted. Wait, are you Richard Carter? I nodded slowly. Depends who's asking. He grinned. Dude, my grandma uses Bridge every day. Loves it. Says it's the first app that doesn't make her feel stupid. I smiled genuinely. Tell her thank you for me. No, seriously, he said. You made her feel human again. He handed me my coffee like it was a medal, and I carried it to the table like it weighed more than it should. I played 2 rounds of chess with a retired math teacher named Ray. Lost the first, won the second. He joked that my endgame was getting sharper in my old age. But I wasn't thinking about chess. I was thinking about Mason. I hadn't heard from him since the dinner. Angela texted me once, a clipped update saying he was figuring things out and needed space. I didn't press. I knew better. You can't force clarity on someone still licking their wounds. And even if I wanted to reach out, I wasn't sure what I'd say that wouldn't unravel everything I'd stood for. I didn't regret what I did, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt. Power doesn't protect you from loneliness or loss, and even righteous choices come with shadows. Douglas called mid-afternoon. I let it ring twice before answering. How's retirement treating you, old man? I chuckled. You trying to poach me full-time? Not yet, he said, but maybe keep your calendar light. We talked numbers for a bit. Bridge had crossed 500,000 users. Word of mouth was turning into press. AARP wanted an official partnership. Even Apple reached out. You built something real, Richard. We built it, I corrected. No, he said. You had the idea. You sparked it. You lit the damn match. I looked out the window, watching leaves swirl across the pavement. I just wanted them to see me, I said. They will, he replied, whether they want to or not. When I got home, there was a letter waiting. No return address. But I knew the handwriting. Mason. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Grandpa, I hated you. For about a week. Then I hated myself. You were right. I got cocky. I thought I was too smart to fail. I thought I'd be the next big thing just because I knew how to pitch and had the right buzzwords. I didn't respect what came before me. I didn't respect you. I still don't fully understand what you built. But I know it means something to a lot of people. I know you didn't just buy my company to get even. You did it to do something better with it. That's what kills me. I'm not ready to talk yet. But I wanted you to know I get it now. Mason. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it and put it in the drawer with Diane's photo. Baby steps, I whispered to her. That night, Ava came over again. No laptop this time. Just her and a puzzle under her arm. She sat on the floor. I joined her. We talked about code. We talked about families. And we didn't talk about Mason. Not yet. But we would. Eventually. I've learned that legacy isn't about being remembered. It's about building something that outlasts bitterness. Bridge wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about repair. Maybe Mason will come around one day. Maybe not. But I'll still be here. With my coffee. My chessboard. And the app one built when they all said I was too old to understand. Sometimes the deepest cuts come from the people who should know us best. But standing your ground doesn't always mean burning bridges. It means building your own. Would you have done what Richard did? Share your story in the comments. We want to hear how you handled being underestimated.